So let's talk boxing. I'd like to see Errol Spence versus Canelo. I was just thinking about different fights. I know some of these fights, they're not likely to happen at the moment, but the more I think about it, the more I think that Errol Spence could give him problems. And if that fight was to happen, let's just say Canelo was to fight Errol Spence, who would you guys like to see win? I personally would like to see Spence beat him. I like Canelo, but I just feel, I don't know, I just feel it's just human nature. I feel more of a connection with Errol Spence, and Canelo being such a dominant fighter and sort of in boxing, he's like the boogeyman. He's terrifying the way he's going through people. I'd like to see him dethroned. I'd like to see him lose. And I think I'm not saying 100%, but I think that would be look. If Errol Spence can, and I'm sure Errol Spence he's a massive welterweight. He's a big welterweight naturally. He's naturally got a big frame, so he's coming down to make welterweight. If he can actually fight at middleweight and get in the shape that he gets in for welterweight, and fight Canelo at middleweight, and they can get a good weight clause and not have any advantages where maybe Canelo can put on 15 pounds after the weigh-in, which is a bit unfair. If they can make that fight as even as possible, I really give Errol Spence a good chance. Obviously Canelo is going to be the favourite, but I really do think, because when you look at the styles, it's interesting, right? And again, everyone's got their own opinions. This is just how I see it, and you guys can let me know what your thoughts are. I think they're similar in the methodology and how they fight, in that they're both pressure fighters. They can do it all. They're both boxers and fighters. And the more I watch Errol Spence, the more I appreciate how, and my brother told me about this, but how technically good he is as a boxer. The obvious things are he's strong, but the way he breaks fighters down and is similar. From what I can see, okay, the styles are going to move a bit different, but the methodology is similar. Errol Spence comes forward, he puts a lot of psychological pressure on fighters, works the body with hurtful shots, brings the hands down, takes them out to the head. He's so good at grinding fighters down and breaking them mentally, and Canelo's phenomenal. They're both good. I just think it will be a good clash of styles. They're both good boxers. They're both physically strong. They're both big for their weights. I actually think, is Errol Spence taller than Canelo? I think Errol Spence might be taller than Canelo. Canelo's he's big in muscle, but he's not that tall. I think Errol Spence might be taller and rangier. So I think Errol Spence would cause him a lot of problems. I don't know if Canelo would take that fight with a southpaw stance, and Errol Spence has got a great jab. He's got everything. He's got a good defense. I could see that being better. I couldn't really see Crawford fighting Canelo. That just he doesn't seem big enough, right? I could be wrong, but Errol Spence, Canelo Alvarez at middleweight at 160. I think that's such a good fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if Errol Spence won that fight on points. Again, I don't think he'd knock Canelo out. I just don't think Canelo could do to Errol Spence what he does to a lot of fighters. I really rate Errol Spence. I've always rated him. Even though, ironically, I've always thought that Crawford will beat Errol Spence. Again, that's another fight to talk about, and that's not a foregone conclusion. But if I had to put my money on it, again, I'm more of a Spence fan. I don't know why I like his style more, but I just think Terence Crawford just seems cuter and sharper in certain departments. But that doesn't. I'm not 100%. I still say it's a 50-50 fight, but I've always slightly leaned towards Crawford. But when it comes to Canelo, it's weird because I don't think Crawford could beat Canelo. I think he's too big for Crawford, but I do think Errol Spence has got the style to beat Canelo. But I could be wrong. Maybe Crawford could beat him. If Crawford could make middleweight, I don't think he could, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, that would just be a great style of fights, because I might be wrong, but I think that fight would be like Triple G Canelo, because they're both come forward fighters. They're both dominant. They both like to take the centre of the ring. They both like to, you know, break the fighters down and back them up. And Errol Spence, both of them, they're both great at doing that. In that Kell Brook fight, which I thought Kell Brook put on the performance of his life, if you go back and watch the Brook Errol Spence fight, although Brook was winning like the first part of the fight, Errol started to really break him down with the body shots, and the way he goes to work with those meaty hooks, and you can't always notice it if you're watching it unless you're really vigilant and you look at the technicalities of what boxers do, and you sort of can have the concentration to focus and see what they're doing. He's so good at doing that, and I think he'd be able to do that to Canelo. Obviously Canelo can do that to him with that power. Canelo could knock him out, but then again, Errol Spence has never been knocked out. He's got a very good chin. He's not very easy to hit. So there's so many questions around the fight. That's why I think it makes a great fight. Because I couldn't say for sure, Canelo would destroy Errol Spence. No, I really don't believe that. Obviously, Canelo would have to be the favourite based on his wins and where he is at. But the actual styles make fights. I think Errol, I could see him winning that on points, nicking it, and obviously Canelo can win it. Especially if Errol Spence had a couple of tune-up fights at middleweight, just to grow into the weight and get used to it and build some momentum and take that confidence and, you know, go into the Canelo fight with what Canelo's doing. He's having loads of fights. He's match fit. He's just peaking all the time. So I'd like to see a fair fight where they're both at a good weight. They're both in shape. They're not weight drained. And, you know, Errol Spence has had at least a fight before, 2 fights, just to warm up at middleweight, and then get in and do a mega fight. That would be unbelievable. Let me know if am I the only one who's thinking that and was thinking that. I know there's other good fights in boxing. There's many others, but when I first heard about that, I thought that's a great idea. When Errol Spence started saying he wants Canelo, I think that's a great future fight, and maybe Errol Spence will get him at the right time. But it would be a hell of a fight. It would be like a sort of technical war, like the Triple G fight, I think. So yeah, there's a few other fights that I'm going to cover on this channel as well. This is probably the best thing I like talking about boxing. You know, what matchups would be good, and that reminds me of, you know, Canelo. Errol Spence moving up and fighting Canelo is similar to when, you know, Manny fought De La Hoya. Obviously different in that De La Hoya wasn't in his prime, but it was still a big risk that Manny took, and it paid off. So I do like those fights. People sometimes don't like it and complain that boxers should stay in their weight divisions like they did years ago, which I did appreciate. You know, the times of Marvin Hagler, who would just stay at middleweight, and Marvin Hagler just ruled middleweight and didn't go up to any other weights, right? There's something special about that and unique. But it does make for a good, match viewing. It's exciting when a welterweight moves up to middleweight, especially when he's a naturally big welterweight. Because really, Errol Spence, everyone's always said it, he's always looked like a natural middleweight to me, or light middleweight, or he's never looked. I don't know how he makes welterweight. He always looks really big. To me anyway. Most welterweights look quite skinny, look quite slim, but Errol Spence just looks broad and strong and big at the weight. So, but Canelo's a beast as well. It'd be great to see how he could handle him. But I just think he's got the composure. He's just got that style. He's relaxed and confident, and I think that would psychologically give Canelo problems. I mean, they'd both be a nightmare for each other. So I'd love to see that fight. And again, there's no shame in whoever lost. So that's the fight I've been thinking about. Oh, before I go, right, I'm going to do a video about this. I know it's never going to happen, right? But I'm sure it's crossed you lot's mind. A fight that I would have loved to have seen, right, in their primes would have been Manny Pacquiao versus Canelo. And I know some people might disagree with me, right? Or might say I'm biased because I'm a Manny fan. I think Manny would have beaten Canelo if they fought at it's hard, innit? It would have to be at welterweight. Manny can't really do any bigger than that when Canelo was a welterweight. If they could get to the same weight basically, or actually even if Canelo was a bit bigger, I think the speed of Manny, I just don't think Canelo could cope with the speed and the angles. Obviously Canelo could hurt Manny, but he's strong. I honestly think Manny beat him. We're never going to know. And it's just my opinion, and people might think I'm out of my mind, but I honestly think Manny at his prime, there's no one he doesn't beat, other than Mayweather, because he's a defensive genius and the style. But I just think he beats them all. When he was in that peak prime, when he was beating Cotto, and when he went up and beat Margarita, I know Margarita's not as good as Canelo. It's not even comparable, but Margarita was massive. When Manny went up and fought him at was it welterweight or was it a catchweight, light middleweight? It was like a giant. It looked ridiculous, the size difference, and Manny battered him, and so he can beat big men. And Manny's very good at avoiding big punches. So I think he would just avoid Canelo. He wouldn't get hit as much, and he'd just be in and out with that rapid combinations and the angles. And I think Canelo wouldn't. I just think he'd have such problems with his Manny's footwork. It's almost like Manny's got the footwork of a boxer, a basketball player, a dancer, a martial artist, and hand speed of Bruce Lee. But yeah, there's always questions. If Canelo hit him, he could knock Manny out. He's got the power to knock him out with one shot. Obviously, Marquez knocked Manny out, and that power that Canelo's got. But I don't think Manny would let him. I think he'd be so alert and cautious, he wouldn't take too many clean shots. And I just think he would win on pure, what do you call it? Pure attrition, hand speed, you know. And I honestly, of course, you can't say Canelo's super fit, but I think Manny was fitter. He can throw more punches. He's quicker. I just think, yeah, I think Manny. But maybe I'm biased. Maybe because I'm a huge Manny Pacquiao fan and I'm just seeing it that way. But that's how I see it. Anyway, let me know your comments. I enjoy these videos. They're fun. They're no pressure at all, like I said, because I've got no pressure to make the channel big or anything like that. Just put them out, enjoy them, and whatever happens, happens. All right, let's talk boxing soon.